When I say Jewish wedding, what comes to mind? A couple under a chuppah, the groom smashing a glass, people being drunkenly hoisted up on chairs. Well, all that's pretty accurate, actually. But it's just a fraction of what happens. So what really goes on under the chuppah during a traditional Jewish wedding? Let's find out. Before the wedding ceremony even starts, the couple signs a marriage document known as a ketubah. But a ketubah isn't some gushing romantic declaration. It's actually a legal contract with phrases like non-mortgageable property. Who says romance is dead? The ketubah lays out a husband's obligations to his wife, guaranteeing her certain benefits during the marriage, as well as in the case of divorce or his death. It's an ancient document dating back to biblical times, when fathers arranged their daughters' marriages. Good times. The moment the daughter went to live with her new husband, her family would lose a valuable contributing member of the household. To compensate, the groom's family would pay the bride's family. In some places, the bride's father kept that money for her as kind of an insurance policy. Notice, though, that I said in some places. This wasn't widespread until the 1st century. See, the rabbis worried about men frivolously divorcing their wives. So how do they protect against this happening? They tweaked the payment arrangement. Instead of the groom paying up front, he agreed to take on an outstanding debt to be paid only if the marriage ended. And there was no getting out of this contract. The groom signed in front of 2 witnesses, who then also signed, verifying that he agreed to all the obligations. And by signing, the groom agreed to pay even if he had to mortgage his own property. The rabbis hoped this arrangement would make husbands think twice before divorcing their wives over the smallest of fights. It might sound strange nowadays, but back then most women were financially dependent on their husbands or fathers, and this arrangement protected women, ensuring that widows and divorcees wouldn't fall into poverty. But what about obligations while the couple's married? Well, that's all in the ketubah as well. A husband is contractually obligated to provide his wife with shelter, clothing, and even conjugal rights. For many couples, the signing of the ketubah is a moment of great celebration. Ketubot are often beautifully illustrated, a work of art that many couples display in their future homes. And if you're thinking it's kind of funny to decorate a legal document and display it proudly, you're not wrong. It's kind of like framing your prenup and hanging it in your living room. But this too is backed by tradition.
Tradition!
According to Jewish law, the couple must always know where their ketubah is located. It might not sound romantic, but the ketubah reveals something about Judaism's understanding of love. It signifies that marriage isn't just a physical or spiritual union. It's also a legal and moral commitment that must be taken seriously if it's to last through the ups and downs of life. It's a promise that even in the worst case scenario, the couple will take care of one another and treat each other with respect. And what could be more romantic than that? Many Jewish weddings, particularly Ashkenazi ones, incorporate a special tradition called the Bedeken, the veiling of the bride, before the official ceremony begins. After the signing of the ketubah, the bride takes a seat on her bridal throne, often surrounded by her friends and family. It's customary for her to pray there, since brides and grooms are considered to be particularly close to God on their wedding day. In the meantime, a throng of the groom's friends and family dance the groom over to the bride, often accompanied by live music and a lot of off-key singing. It's an emotional moment and one of great anticipation, as the bride and groom see each other for the first time after a traditional week-long separation before the wedding. Among cheers and tears, the groom lowers the veil over the bride's face. Bedeken means covering in Yiddish. The custom harks back to biblical times when Jacob was tricked by his father-in-law into marrying Leah instead of Rachel, the bride he really wanted. To prevent this from happening again, the groom now makes sure there were no last-minute switcheroos.
The old switcheroo.
He confirms that the woman before him is in fact his bride, as he places the veil over her himself. The custom is full of spiritual significance. When the groom veils the bride, he affirms that he sees her, beyond just the physical, that he's marrying her for what's on the inside, her essence, her soul. But the veil also symbolizes that even in this moment of uniting, the bride and groom are still separate people. There will always be parts of each other that are veiled to the other, and yet they commit to continuously rediscovering each other, regardless of what the future holds. Perhaps the most famous visual of the Jewish wedding ceremony is the Chuppah, aka the wedding canopy.
What is it?
It's an altar, or you might call it a Huppa.
The word chuppah means covering or protection. And chuppahs come in all shapes and sizes, but they traditionally have one thing in common. They're open on all sides and covered on top. The openness recalls the tent of Abraham and Sarah, whose home was always open to guests, with the hope that the new couple, too, will open up their home in hospitality, warmth, and love. Chuppahs are often elaborately decorated, and many couples use their design to showcase their creativity and personalities. But the chuppah is not just a beautiful canopy to hold a ceremony. It's actually a legal requirement for marriage. The earliest reference to the chuppah comes from King David's Psalms, which compares the son to a groom coming forth from his chuppah like a hero eager to run his course. And also from the book of Joel, let the groom emerge from his chamber and the bride from her chuppah. The rabbis disagreed on what exactly constituted a chuppah, but by the 16th century, it came to be understood as the canopy we see today, which symbolizes the new home the couple's forming together. Some chuppot have poles that are fastened to the ground, and others are held up by the couple's friends and family in honor of the people who raised the couple and led them to this day. Chuppot are also often erected under the stars, recalling God's promise to Abraham to make his children as numerous as the stars in the sky, and reminding the couple that God alone is their protection. While the chuppah with 4 poles and a covering is pretty commonplace in many Jewish weddings, some Sephardic grooms have the custom to cover the bride with an article of clothing, often a talit, to symbolize the chuppah act. The chuppah ceremony attracts some pretty special guests. It's said that the divine presence graces every chuppah ceremony, and so do the ancestors of the bride and groom, who descend from heaven to join the wedding celebration. That is, they're not able to make it in person. Without these guests, the bride and groom would not have gotten to this very special day. The last step of the marriage ceremony is the Sheva Brachot, or the 7 blessings. It's a big honor to be called up to recite one of the 7 blessings, usually reserved for the most cherished, influential people in the couple's lives. The first blessing is said over the wine. The second praises God for creating all things. The third and fourth recall God's creation of man in his image and woman as his partner. The fifth places the couple in the context of the Jewish people by invoking the memory of the temple in Jerusalem. The sixth recognizes the joy of this moment and blesses God for gladdening the bride and groom. Finally, the seventh wishes the newlyweds joy and happiness, gladness, jubilation, cheer and delight, love, friendship, harmony, and fellowship. These blessings acknowledge the joy of this moment and bless the couple with even more joy in the future. They place the couple within the long arc of Jewish history, going all the way back to the first man. At our wedding, the Sheva Brachot were a great way to get our loved ones involved. We had our siblings and our friends recite the blessings in English and Hebrew, and the execution was... The bride and groom get to hear these blessings a lot in their early days as husband and wife. They repeated during the Birkat HaMazon, which is the grace after meals, during the reception. And then, for the next 7 days, the newlyweds are treated like royalty as friends and family host them for a meal each evening, a tradition which is also called Sheva Brachot. The Sheva Brachot are a beautiful and clever way to include additional people in the celebration who may not have been at the wedding. And they serve as a reminder to the couple that they have the community support surrounding them always, in the happiest of times and in the hardest.
Mazel tov. Now step on the glass.
It's the moment we've all been waiting for. The iconic sound of the groom's foot crushing the glass and the joyous shouts of Mazel tov! But where did this tradition actually come from? The Talmud describes 2 wedding feasts that got a little out of control. In response, the groom's fathers took expensive glasses and broke them before the guests. It's kind of like Judaism in a nutshell. You can't ever be too happy, right? But that was sort of the point. The Gemara goes on to say that we must serve God with fear and awe and rejoice with trembling, meaning even in the place where there is rejoicing, a wedding for example, there should also be trembling. Breaking a glass is certainly one way to sober up the mood. Later on, the tradition morphed into a commemoration of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And there are other interpretations too. Some say that the loud crash confuses any evil that might come to haunt the happy occasion. Others believe that the shattering of the glass replaces any trouble that could have happened during the wedding. Some wedding planners say the trick of the trade is to use a light bulb for that perfect break sound. The breaking of the glass is a nod to the fact that nothing lasts forever. Not bad times, not good ones. Sorrow can come on the heels of joy, just as joy can come on the heels of sorrow. And it's a reminder to the new couple that relationships are fragile. We have to work to keep them intact. My husband and I actually saved some of the glass shards to be repurposed into a beautiful mezuzah for our home. Every Jewish wedding is as unique as the couple it unites. But above all, they have one thing in common. They're deeply spiritual and joyous, celebrating the bride and groom as they open the next chapter in their lives together.